Now I'm going to model how I would do this. So, the first thing I do is I'm going to take the test. As I get the test, the first place that I'm going, let me go to the next page, is the cover sheet. This is going to be the thing that's going to just inform me overall about how this scholar did. So as I'm looking at this, I understand, okay, so they only made 3 errors, so decoding seems like pretty strong. They were able to get almost all the words. They passed for reading rate, but I also noticed that he read in 3 minutes and 5 seconds, and the cutoff is 3 minutes and 16 seconds. So what that really means is like 1 or 2 times that he slowed down to solve a word, and he does not pass on rate. So that's something I'm going to need to pay attention to, and I'm going to need to think about and support. Passed on fluency, reading 3 and 4 word phrases, passed oral comprehension, and failed on silent comprehension. So I also am thinking about, like, is this a scholar who might have trouble with stamina or with retaining meaning over a longer chunk of text? Because I noticed they did very well here and significantly less well here. I'm also noticing, okay, so there is an inferential and a critical thinking question, and I'm going to dive into what happened there as we go. Next thing that I would go to is my running record. So when I looked at the running record, I'm noticing, so as I look at the running record, a lot of what I'm looking for here is trying to figure out why was reading rate low. So the first thing I'm looking for is, am I going to see a lot of repeated words where they went back and reread? Because maybe that's why they were low. I don't see that here. What I noticed is that there were, for the errors, they substituted except for expect and then self-corrected. They substituted mats for pats. They substituted well for will for well, and then they left off the ending for can. So those are the errors that they made. So what I'm noticing there is that this is a scholar who's pretty much exclusively thinking about visual cueing to figure out the answer. So the substitutions don't make sense, but they look right if you don't look at it that carefully. Hold on. So the next thing that I'm trying to figure out is, okay, so do I have enough information to figure out why rate was so low and why they almost didn't pass on it? And I actually don't know for sure, but there's 2 things that I think might have happened. One is just that he's reading just too slowly in general, and the rate at which he's reading is too slow. The other possibility is that he's slowing down to word solve. He's slowing down to word solve a lot, and then he's typically able to solve the word and get it correct, but that's why his rate is slow. I actually can't tell from looking at this text. So the next step that I would do is look at the tester and actually just go and ask them quickly, like, hey, do you remember why rate was slow? Was it this or was it this? Hopefully they remember, and if not, I'm going to make a note that when I start my group, that's a priority for me to collect data. So then I'm going to look at the conversation. The conversation, they had all the first page right, so I started looking at the second page. When I looked at the question 6, what I noticed is that, so that's a question for anyone who doesn't know, my friend Kendra. Basically the plot is she has an invisible friend. Her invisible friend gets her into trouble and helps her out with things. And the narrator talks the entire time as though her invisible friend were a real person who is just invisible. But we as the reader need to understand that actually it's an imaginary friend and not an invisible friend, even though that's not in the text. And so here, they have good evidence about what they went to the right part of the text. They talked about the bad things that Kendra did, where the narrator talks about Kendra getting her in trouble, but they didn't interpret those facts, and they didn't talk about the fact that Kendra was actually imaginary and give some reason for why she would be saying those things. So it's a pretty factual answer. It's also a pretty limited answer. Then I thought about, okay, so I went down here and I looked at this question. The question here is, why do you think Lisa pretends to have an invisible friend? And here she talks about she thinks it's fun, she has someone to help her, and she uses her imagination. She thinks she has someone to help. It says that Kendra helps her. All of those are things that are actually in the text. So again, there's some good evidence here, but it's not being explained or interpreted. So I'm noticing a pattern there, that there's a lot of evidence here, not a lot of explanation, and that the answers are pretty limited. So I noticed that there's a factual error and a limited error. The next thing that I thought about is, okay, so what bottom lines do these questions relate to? I went to my bottom lines document, and I started at the 6, and I went up from the 6 And on the 7, I saw both character motivation and citing evidence 3, where one of the typical errors is they rely primarily on factual information to respond to questions. So I actually think both of those things are at play here, and character motivation is like the biggest gap because these are both character motivation questions. Hold on one more second. So then from there, I was like, okay, so I feel like I have a sense for the gaps. I went and talked to the tester and figured out that what had happened primarily was that they were slowing down to word solve, and that was why their rate was low. So then I moved from there into filling out my chart and thinking about what I'm doing next. So here's what I put in. The scholar's name was here. The instructional level was a 7. What elements did they struggle with? So I put rate. And I put a note for myself. They were just above the cutoff by 10 seconds. And then I put that they struggled with inferential and critical thinking questions, and that they missed them on the silent reading, and they only didn't achieve by 1 question. All this information that I want to, it's like relevant to me and important to me, so I want to make sure I have it so that I know when I'm going forward, because I'm not going to have their step test in front of me. For why I said they didn't understand character motivation, they found relevant evidence, but were not able to interpret it, and I put an F for factual. I noticed that the degree of complexity around the idea of an invisible friend and the lack of a reliable narrator probably hurt her comprehension here. And then I put that she slowed down her word solve for too long because she wasn't thinking about meaning. Because that's my hypothesis. She's only thinking about the visual structure of words and decoding the words, but not thinking about the meaning of words, and you didn't have to help her. So then I moved to the how. When I got to the how, the biggest thing is I want to make sure that she can read books with plots where character motivations require inferences to figure out. If he's just reading books the entire time that character motivation is explicitly stated, he is not going to be able to do this on his own when it comes time to the set test. Second thing I wanted to do was prompt on character motivation, and the prompt I made a note to myself to use was just simply like, why does blank do blank? For rate, I wanted to push on using meaning queuing, and so I put a note for myself to use the prompt, does that make sense, when they're not thinking about that. Then, during the comp conversation, I want to go to him for character motivation follow-up questions a lot. So I just want to make sure I do that a lot during the comp conversation. And I want to make sure that I double down on listening to him during Storybook so that I can continue to prompt him as necessary and get So this is what I did to go through thinking about this one scholar. Go ahead and take 30 seconds to capture what you saw me do for those 2 focus questions in your handout. Go ahead and turn and talk to the person next to you. First, make sure that you're clear on the process that I went through, and then think about what made my analysis effective. Let's start by talking about what you saw me do, or the process that I went through. As Stephanie, will you kick us off? Great.
So,
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I got it.
Great.
So,
That's true.
So, you check the bottom lines on the bottom paper, and you look at the skills that the scholar needs to focus on based on the bottom lines and match that up to the questions that they struggle on.
Great. Did you leave that out?
So you actually looked at the specific answers that the student gave, not just like, oh, they missed the critical thinking, they missed the inferencing, but we looked at their answers and thought about what was lacking in their answer, and not just, oh, they didn't get the inference, but then you look back at the text and you're like, well, they did pull the text evidence, but they didn't take it to the next place. So I think like using his actual words, the test, and then tying it all to the step the bottom line to figure out specifically where you can push them in those gaps to then develop a specific questions for them. It's all effective. I don't know what you do.
Anna, what would you add to that?
I was more thinking how comprehensive your analysis was, like fluency, rate, comprehension with all different question types. And then like the same questions they got wrong, you like looked at the bottom line and identified the gap.
Liz?
And specifically, it was effective because you had something you could walk away with and use the next day of conferring prompt, and also something to look for, I guess, the reading twice in the storybook. Like, that's something like you always are to do in your guided reading.
Yes. Anything that folks noticed or stuck out to people that did not get named so far? Nicole? And then Jordan, and then Liam, and then Tasha.
So what I saw was, to me, was we were looking for like discrepancy in accuracy, the reading accuracy and the reading rate. So like, you were like the person looking at the already scored test. So you were going back to the tester, asking about the reading rate, and if they didn't know, you would probably try to set them up to find out better accurate scores.
Yes, absolutely. Jordan?
I just thought it was important how you were thinking about the only question you missed, but that there's also to make sure you're reading through this cycle, and if I don't have these types of books, then they're not going to add that to it.
Yes. And if I'm not the planner, what am I going to do? Yeah, I'm going to reach out to the planner. Because odds are pretty good that if my kids struggle with it at this level, your kids probably struggle with it at this level, because we tend to see a lot of commonalities in the things that kids struggle with. Lynn?
One thing I observed in your analysis of the student was that you looked at the test, and from the test you looked at potential pitfalls. For example, you're looking at the time that they're reading at, the rate that they're reading, that they potentially would fail if they had tried to figure out the word, an extra word that they would fail, so that you're trying to kind of set the student up for success with compressed education.
Yes. Yeah, I think that piece of like, I'm also looking for where you just above where you need to be, because a slight variation might be equal to us. Who was last?
It was already said.
So when we're thinking about a strong analysis, there's three things that we want to make sure that we're doing. One, we want it to be specific. We want it to be specific. So I should have evidence and assessment. I should make it bite-sized. I think Phoebe's point around going deeper than just you missed an inferential question is super important. Because if it's not specific, it's actually probably not going to be actionable, or if it is actionable, it's not going to be effective. So by actionable, we mean I can do this right from the jump in the reading room, because our goal is that we're going to close these gaps up as quickly as possible. And then last, being comprehensive, which was also named. So making sure that like I am taking time to fully use this test, because it's chock full of good information about who this child is right now as a reader. And so even though you pass with flying colors on accuracy, like I'm still looking at the words that you got wrong, because that's going to give me information about who you are as a reader. I think like this is most of the process that I went through. We already talked about that. It's also in my handout. So we're going to keep going. I think one of the things that people express finding most challenging about this is like, okay, so I get what they struggled with and I get why they struggled. What does it look like to effectively respond? The questions that I ask myself to figure out how to respond are pretty general. It's like, what are the prompts that I can use? That should always be a part of your hack. You should always be walking out with 1 to 3 prompts that you are going to use to support that scholar. You can use your bottom lines document to help you. You can reach out to other folks to help you, but like, that's something we should always be clear on. 2, like what's data that I can collect that's going to inform my that's going to help me understand, like, are you growing in this level and what else do I need to do, or what's working or not working? 3, how can I give you additional at-bats or additional support? Right, so for me, I wanted to make sure that for character motivation questions, I was upping the frequency with which you were getting those, and I wanted to make sure that I was upping the frequency in reading mastery, where I was listening to you read, so I could support you in what itself. And then 4, are there thinking steps or other supports that I can give that scholar to scaffold for them or to make it more accessible? Maybe I'm going to give you a strategy card that you're going to keep on your desk. Maybe I'm going to give you a thinking job. There's lots of different ways that I can provide additional support. I want to just quickly review error types because I know that this is not it takes a little while to be sticky. This is such a key element of understanding errors in terms of comp, because we don't just want to think about bottom lines, we want to think about what are you doing and not doing to make meaning from the text as a reader. What are the things that you're including and not including in questions? The first one is personal experience. So that means I'm thinking about what I know or what I would do when I'm answering this question, not thinking about the character and what they knew or what they were going to do. So same examples that we had before. So we think about step 4, upside down, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
So Peter's looking at things upside down because it's fun. I know that because I love to look at things upside down at home. It's great that you love to look at things upside down at home, but you actually might hate it and Peter might like it, and then you can get it wrong. Over-relying on facts. So Peter's looking at things upside down because things are different upside down. That's in the story. There's no piece of interpretation there to explain why Peter likes it. Limited response because it's fun. You are on the right track, but you did not fully explain your answer enough for me to know that you really understood what's happening in this story with this question. Q answers a different question than the one that was asked. That's simple. They just answer a totally different question. C, confusion. That means like I did not get the book at either an inferential or a literal level, and so I'm just saying things that are actually not a reasonable or valid interpretation of what happened in the text. Tasha.
But that also be for a question, not for the question that they did understand, so that we see it.
Yes. No. It could be a C or it could be a Q. A lot of times it's going to be a Q because they like heard a different question and answered that.
What about if they didn't understand the question? I'm thinking of like a one and test, like the last question, why you didn't understand the question.
Yes. C. Happens a lot. Miss Holden.
Is it possible that there are just certain questions on the text that are really that we may be
So we're not going to change the question. There are definitely questions that are phrased in a way that trips kids up. And so I think like that should make us think about the way we ask questions too, and pushing kids to think about answering questions backwards. I'm going to keep going. Alright, so now it's work time. 1, you're finishing up your org health and 360 surveys. To be clear, everybody should be doing me, Max, and Becca. You should be filling it out for your coach. Everybody should be doing NOAA, and if you've worked closely with Lourdes this year, you should be doing Lourdes. You should start on your What, Why, How. I'm going to press send and send you in 1 second the template for What, Why, How, as well as the exemplar that we had from Laura Goldstein. Please make sure you save a copy to the desktop. Please make sure you save a copy to the desktop, because I just went through and deleted somebody's What, Why, How in the example. If that was yours, I have it saved to my desktop, so ask me. I will see you back here at 3:58 to close out this and to go into our closing.